All right, all right. Well, Ben, thank you very much for joining me today on Vagabond. It is a pleasure, and I will pass the mic off to you. I've spoken enough already. Now, please give us, your intro, name, background, where you're at.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. So I'm Ben, originally from France, and now back in France. What did you say you wanted? Sorry.
Yeah. Just name, where you're from. So you're from France. Now you're back in France. Where were you in between?
Oh, so that one's the story. I think my first year abroad was in 2010. I moved to Poland, then came back to France for a bit, then started working in Singapore, then moved back and launched first business, went with that business to Portugal, then to Chile, then started working in Luxembourg, then transferred internally to Cambridge, UK, then transferred internally to Seattle, then changed job, started working 2 years in Germany, in Munich, and I've been back in France since October 2022, sorry.
Sheesh. All right, little side note. Of all those places you travel, which one had the best weather?
I gotta say, if I had to pick a place for the weather, that would be the wrong criteria.
Yeah.
Because all of those places have terrible weather. Singapore might be the exception. I like the weather in Singapore because it's very constant. You get I'm going to talk Celsius, and I'm terrible at Fahrenheit, so but it's between 28 and 32 constant throughout the year, and you get one rainy season where it's basically raining 1 or 2 hours per day, and then that's about it. And Chile is a close second. You get good seasons there.
Chile, in South America?
Yes.
Oh, wow. Okay. I know Santiago, Chile, they're starting to really heavily invest in their startup community down there. I think it's Chile Go, or I forget what the accelerator is called, but they're trying to find startups from around the world to come in and incubate there and then grow.
I think so. In 2013, we joined a program called Startup Chile.
I think that might be it.
Okay. Yeah. I think we were generation 8 of that thing.
Gotcha. Yeah, I've heard some good stuff about it. I've been following who is it? Slidebean for a while, and they were the first people I heard about it from.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. They made some great videos, and way back in the day. I think I was early enough that I bought their lifetime subscription, and it still goes to now. I think it's triple the price now. But that's how I heard about it. But enough about me. All right, let's talk about PopSync. I want to hear all about it. And we'll start off with the elevator pitch.
Sure. So it's going to take you less than a ride, but so basically, what we're doing at PopSync is an integration. That's basically the job. So in data, you have this problem, which is as old as the second database, which is as soon as you want data, it's always somewhere else. So what we do is we move data from one place to another. If you're deploying a new tool, if you're centralizing data in your data warehouse or data lake, if you want basically the data in one place, you have to move it there. And what we're doing is we have this platform and the underlying technology that allows us to move data, capture it in real time and move it to where you need to exploit it.
I like it. All right. So to kind of break it down a little bit more, who would you say your typical customers are right now?
So we already have several profiles within the customer base.
Okay.
The main two that we see today are startups and scale-ups that are setting up, so either have set up their analytics or are setting up their analytics. And typically what they want to do is they want to move the data within their operational tools. So think HubSpot, for instance, or within their data warehouse or data lake. So, and that's more for the analytical use cases. So they want real-time visibility on what's happening in the product. They want to know how their product is performing with their users, and they want to have the ability to support and help their users as fast as they can, basically. Like if something goes wrong, you need to know about it so that you can offer the best support possible. So that's mostly like for the startups and scale-ups. And the other one is SMBs. So typically businesses that have an aging infrastructure, think like IBM machines from the 80s, and they keep on hearing about like all the fancy new toolbox that everyone's using. And the thing is, like when they deploy SaaS application and cloud services. And you have a disconnect between those two. So how do you get the data from one tool to the other? And that's basically the job. So we help them it's more like modernize their toolbox, or at least get access to the modern toolbox via integrations.
Nice. And is this all like just on their end, or do you need somebody in there in person to help them with the integration, or is it simple enough that their usual IT person can take it on and run with it?
No, well, it depends basically. Like usually, where there can be a need is within the configuration space. So sometimes you need to do some prep because like either accesses aren't there. If it's the first time they connect their mainframe to the outside, then they need to like set up like secure ports, like an SSH tunnel, like things like that allow us to connect securely to the infrastructure. So there can be like some configuration, some setup, like whitelisting, that kind of stuff, but it's fairly straightforward. So like once the setup is there, we don't need to like be in person. We don't need to go there with a cable. Like it's basically like you go into PopSync and you build like a bunch of configurations. I think depending on what you're connecting, like it's between 2 and 10 fields that you need to fill in, and that's it. Your life, like your data is transiting from one place to another.
Nice. I think I told you before, I used to work for Kodiak.io. They were a DevOps solution. I think their pitch was it's DevOps as easy as Netflix, as easy to use as Netflix. Because it really is like having to attach Kubernetes and SQL servers and everything else. If you don't know what you're doing, it's very easy to destroy a lot of data. And I'm sure the UI part of it has been, just as challenging as everything else to make it easy enough for most people to use, right?
Yeah. So funny enough, like the UI space has been a lot of like. So in the first phase, like when you're really building, it's a lot of like psychology, and it's a lot of like reflection, because of the technologies that we use and because of what people are used to, you need to make sure that you transcribe some of the concepts that they're familiar with well enough that when they come into this new environment, they're not lost. Like the point is, people who are already using data technologies should be able to use that tool. And there's a certain way that people are used to seeing things. So you need to figure out a way to like translate some of the concepts that didn't exist for them, because like we move data in real time and they're used to synchronizing data once a day. So how do you reconcile this? Because they would ask you like, so when is it running next? And you have to help them understand that it's live, so it's not running per se. The data is already translating. So that thing is like something that you need to bridge. The UI is one of those mechanisms, like those bridging mechanisms. And now it's mostly observation and feedback. So people are like telling us like, hey, I would like this feature, this feature, this feature. And you need to figure out like, okay, does that feature even make sense? Where does it go? How would we put it so that it doesn't break the overall coherence of the product? And that's the kind of stuff that we do now. And then observation, because when we look at certain sessions, like we see that certain things may not be as optimized as we thought they would be. And then you need to make sure that the user has pathways within the product that make as much sense as possible.
Nice. Before we move on, I wanted to ask this specific thing. What are the benefits of real time versus kind of once a day transfer of data?
Yeah, there's two main benefits. One is cost optimization, because as it turns out, like going faster means going cheaper. For Like if we dig on that, like for mainly two reasons. The first one is you don't need to stage data. There's less compute and storage involved in that entire process. Think about it like you could, if you burst a workload that's like super heavy because you need to move the entirety of yesterday's data, then it's pretty expensive. Whereas if you move data incrementally, like as it happens, then you have less staging that's necessary. And you also do less compute in the middle, but for mostly for incremental reasons. And the other one is actually this incremental aspect. Instead of moving the data, I'm figuring out like, okay, what did I get? Like, what is the new data? What is the updated data? Like, is there anything that has been deleted? You actually move things that are closer to like operations. So you move like, oh, this line or this record needs to be updated. This record needs to be inserted. This record needs to be deleted. So you're moving really incremental data, which means you're moving less data. So that's the other part. Like, and then the second aspect is basically latency. It opens the door to a ton of new use cases. Like if you like, especially now with like all the buzz around Gen AI, like people want to have access to data that is now, because Gen AI is an in-session thing. Then you need to have data that has a latency that can match that. So if you're doing data science on top of like production data, if you're doing operations, like everything needs to be like contextualized, and you cannot contextualize yesterday's data. It's already too late. So we help them do that on the go.
Nice. Makes perfect sense. All right, let's take a few steps back. I want to hear the origin story. How did you start this? Why did you start this? We hear that, most of the time whenever an entrepreneur decides to really take that leap and start a company like this, it's usually to solve a problem for either themselves or a company they're working in. So I'll pass the mic back to you. I want to hear, how did you start it and why did you, take this, leap?
Yeah. So back when I was working at Amazon, we had like a very powerful tool for internal data sharing. And that was really nice because it allows a company of like, at the time, 1 million people to break silos at the global scale for using like just a bunch of tools. Like it was really, really powerful because it meant that teams from across the world could potentially exchange specific data sets, and it really meant that anyone could collaborate with anyone, like given certain boundaries. So that was super powerful. And then, like as I moved away from Amazon, I saw that not everyone has this kind of tools, and I got to experience like what it looks like without that kind of toolbox. And it really means like a lot of silos. It really means like internal business units almost competing with one another, and that got me like really frustrated because it basically does two things. First, it diverts resources, like the time you spend facing that internal competition and like solving for this technical problem as if it were a one-off instead of like actually addressing it as a whole means that you're not working on something else that potentially has more value. And the second one is it limits the operation capabilities, because usually you have to face a number of batch workloads, like things that are very like orchestrated in order to access the data, which means that the one who pays for this is usually the customer experience. Because as a customer, like if operations can only like see your problem within the next 6 hours or something, it means you have to spend 6 hours with your problem. So it limits the ability of a business to respond to user issues. So that's been like the thing I've experienced, and it's the origin story. It's what got me like working with my co-founder on like an MVP, and ultimately like what became PopSync.
I like it. I think it was Sean Purry on the My First Million podcast was talking about one of the best like methods or ways to start a business is find what these big companies have that the smaller guys don't have access to, and create it for them. And it sounds like it's exactly what you did. You saw a need and you said, I'm going to fill it.
Yeah, it's literally like it's not exactly the platform that Amazon uses because it's
Obviously, yeah.
Completely different, but it has like a lot of
Control
the
C.
yeah, there's a lot of philosophy that I observed, which was like
Yeah.
really well. It was working really well for 1 million employees, so why not for 1,000?
I like it. No, it makes perfect sense. All right, so we heard the origin story. Tell me about, this is always kind of the big one, your first sale. There's a huge jump between writing the code, making the product, and then taking your baby out there and saying, hey, like, you should buy this.
Yeah, I mean, first sale was complicated because so we had like this thing which was we had a pretty long beta period where people were like breaking the product, and it was really really good for us because it taught us a lot about the technology and how to make it scale, because we're in a different paradigm. Like, you have to see a lot of things to actually do. First sale was actually pure inbound. So we had been doing outbound for like some time, and then like this one startup comes to us and says like, hey, I want to move from this competitor of yours to you. And we worked with them, we solved a few things to onboard them, and then like that was basically it. And it happened, and that's it. That's like it was really just like out of all the outbound we did, in order to figure out like, okay, like let's get our wording better. Like, the guys that gave us the better wording were basically like those first users that told us like, hey, we're trying to move away from this specific competitor, and it looks like you're the only one who can do like the exact same thing according to our specificities. So we were like, okay.
I like it. You made such a great product, they found you.
Yeah, it's I mean, we've been so we can definitely improve a lot when it comes to content, but so far what we've been putting out there has been like pretty instrumental in the acquisition.
I like it. That's awesome, man. I love to hear the success, starting, and especially your first sale is always a big one. It's that really validation that really helps to get the second one. And my background's sales, and the first one is always the hardest, and then the second one gets slightly easier, and then it just you put that system in place, and it just grows from there. But I love to hear it. So before I don't like to stay too long in kind of the pitch deck usual questions, but I would like to hear, what kind of differentiates you from some of the competition out there?
So there's two things that really differentiate us. One is this latency cost aspect, like the efficiency of the solution itself. The second one is because of the nature of the technology, like most competing businesses focus on the data warehouse. So, or the data lake. Like, what they do is either move data in a data warehouse or move data out of a data warehouse. We don't care. We move data from X to wherever in the alphabet. So the point is like some of the people we integrate with now are working on like some of those like old mainframe technologies I mentioned, and sending data directly to HubSpot. If you're working with a competitor, like, you need one tool to extract the data, put it into the data warehouse, and then one tool to extract it from the data warehouse, which means three tools: one to ingest, one data warehouse, and one for the egress. And we do it in one. So you save 3 bills.
Yeah, simplicity and speed. I like it. All right, perfect. Well, it was awesome hearing about PopSync and everything that you guys are doing, and I love that you're kind of modernizing the data transfer space and making it a lot simpler for especially people like me who are not as technically savvy. I'm learning. My coding knowledge is kind of stops at JavaScript and C#. I tried getting into Kubernetes and everything, and my brain just couldn't handle it. So I'll know my limits. Perfect. I want to hear a little bit more about kind of your startup community and kind of, yes, Europe, but specifically more France. You moved back to Paris. Was there a strategic reason for that? Was it just because you know that place well? What kind of community do you have there?
So when Alex and I started PopSync, I was living in Germany at the time, and especially in Munich. What I found in Munich was that there is a startup scene. It's just that it has some unicorns, but it is very small in comparison to Paris, for instance. It is also slightly less active, and it has another problem, which is Munich is Bavaria. Bavaria requires you to speak Bavarian. It's like you can get along with English, but it's not the language of business. You need to speak the domestic language if you want to sell domestically. That's one of the things that was like a bit of a hold when it came to actually prospecting. And the other one was, it's a 1 million people city, and Paris is I guess 12 to 16 million. So like the order of magnitude is slightly different. Paris is super active. There's a lot of mechanisms from the French government to support startups, and we take really big advantage of that. So yeah, that was the main reason.
Nice. Well, I don't want to take up too much of your time. I just want to say thank you very much for giving me your time. I'll have to ask more questions about Paris and France as a whole. We'd love to hear more about those next time. And next year, whenever I come visit Europe, I will definitely stop by and we'll grab a bite.
With pleasure.
Awesome, man. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Take care.